After 70, the fear of falling rarely announces itself loudly. It settles in quietly, like a shadow that lengthens at the end of the day. It shows up when you pause before stepping off a curb, when you grip a railing longer than you used to, when you think twice before carrying something that once felt light. The body remembers balance, but the mind begins to question it. And that questioning can feel heavier than any physical weakness. Many people believe this fear is simply a result of aging. They assume that as the years pass, falling becomes inevitable, and fear is just the price of survival. But that belief misses something important. The fear is often not rooted in the body's true limits. It grows from a quiet loss of confidence, built slowly through small moments of doubt. One slip that did not cause injury, one comment from a worried relative, one story about someone else who fell and never fully recovered. Over time, these moments collect and begin to speak louder than lived experience. The body may still be capable, but the mind becomes cautious in a way that narrows life. This is where fear becomes more powerful than risk. Fear convinces people to move less, to avoid familiar spaces, to sit instead of stand, to wait instead of act. Ironically, this retreat can make the world feel more dangerous, not less. Confidence fades not because it was lost all at once, but because it was slowly handed over to worry. There is also a deeper layer to this fear that is rarely spoken aloud. Falling is not just about injury. It represents loss of control. It threatens independence, privacy, and dignity. A fall suggests a moment when the body betrays the self, when help is needed, when roles quietly reverse. For many older adults, this idea is far more frightening than pain itself. It touches something emotional and personal, something tied to identity. Families often misunderstand this. They see fear and interpret it as weakness. They respond with urgency, with protection, with plans made quickly and sometimes without full understanding. But fear does not mean readiness to give up a life that still holds meaning. It means something inside is asking for reassurance, not removal. The difference matters. Understanding this fear requires honesty and patience. It means recognizing that fear is not failure. It is information. It tells a story about uncertainty, about transitions, about the desire to remain steady in a changing world. When fear is treated only as a problem to eliminate, the person carrying it can feel overlooked. When it is treated as something to understand, it becomes a guide. Many seniors discover that once they name the fear, it begins to loosen its grip. They realize that their lives have not suddenly become unsafe overnight. What has changed is the way risk feels. The mind has begun to imagine outcomes before they happen, often leaning toward the worst. This awareness creates space for wiser decisions, decisions grounded in reality rather than assumption. This chapter is not about dismissing fear or pushing it aside. It is about placing it where it belongs. Fear can coexist with strength. Caution can exist without surrender. When the fear of falling is understood as a matter of confidence rather than age alone, new possibilities quietly open. And from that understanding, a different path forward begins to take shape. Once the fear of falling enters the conversation, another idea often follows close behind. It may come softly, framed as concern, or firmly, presented as a practical solution. Someone suggests a care facility, not always because something terrible has happened, but because it might. The suggestion can feel sudden, even when it comes from love. Families are often carrying their own fears. They imagine phone calls in the night, unanswered messages, a moment when they are not there to help. In their minds, recommending a care facility feels responsible. It feels like choosing safety over risk, certainty over uncertainty. Many believe they are protecting the person they care about, even when that protection comes at an emotional cost. Professionals, too, are guided by systems built around prevention and liability. Doctors, social workers, and advisors are trained to reduce risk wherever possible. When they see an older adult who has fallen before or expresses fear of falling, their thinking often moves quickly towards structured environments. Facilities are designed to minimize accidents, and in a chart or assessment, that can look like the safest option available. But safety, when viewed only through policies and procedures, can become narrow. It may overlook what gives a person purpose, familiarity, and calm. The quiet comfort of one's own kitchen, the rhythm of a morning routine shaped over decades, the simple reassurance of knowing where everything is and why it is there. These details rarely appear in recommendations, yet they matter deeply to well-being. There is also an assumption, often unspoken, that aging naturally leads to decline in independence. Once someone passes a certain age, independence is treated as temporary, something to be managed rather than preserved. A fear of falling becomes evidence that the next stage has arrived, whether the individual feels ready or not. This assumption can push decisions forward faster than understanding can catch up. Care facilities themselves are not the enemy. For many people, they provide necessary support, companionship, and relief. But the problem arises when they become the default answer, rather than one option among many. When the question shifts from what do you need to feel steady and safe, to where should you be placed, something essential is lost in translation. Convenience also plays a role, though it is rarely acknowledged openly. Coordinating care at home requires time, communication, and flexibility. A facility offers a single solution, neatly packaged hell. For families juggling work, distance, and responsibilities, it can feel like the only manageable choice. Yet convenience for others does not always align with peace for the person living the decision. Many seniors sense this imbalance immediately. They hear reassurance in the words being spoken, but they also feel something slipping away. Choice, control, the right to decide the pace of their own life. Even when no one intends harm, the recommendation can land like a quiet closing door. This chapter is not about rejecting care facilities outright. It is about pausing long enough to ask whether the reasons behind the recommendation truly serve the person at the center of it. Fear, liability, and assumption are powerful forces, but they are not the same as wisdom. When decisions are made with reflection instead of urgency, space opens for alternatives that honor both safety and independence. When someone enters a care facility too early, the change often appears reasonable on the surface. Meals are provided, hallways are monitored, help is nearby. From the outside, it can look like a sensible exchange, trading a little independence for a lot of safety. But what is less visible and rarely discussed at the time of the decision are the quiet costs that unfold slowly after the move is made. One of the first things to fade is routine. Not the schedule printed on a wall, but the deeply personal rhythm built over a lifetime. Waking when the body is ready, preparing food in a familiar way, sitting in a favorite chair at a certain hour without explanation. In a facility, routines are shared, standardized, and efficient. They are designed to work for many people at once. Over time, this can create a subtle sense of displacement, as if life is being lived inside someone else's clock. Along with routine, autonomy begins to narrow. Decisions that once felt small and private become supervised or scheduled. When to bathe, what to eat, when to go outside. None of this is meant to diminish a person, yet the cumulative effect can feel shrinking. Independence is not only about big choices, it lives in the everyday acts of deciding for oneself. When those moments disappear, confidence often follows. There is also a quiet loneliness that can exist even in places full of people. Companionship offered by proximity is not the same as connection built through shared history. Many residents find themselves surrounded by others, yet missing the comfort of their own community, their own neighbors, their own spaces filled with memory. Loneliness does not always come from being alone. Sometimes it comes from being unseen. Ironically, entering a facility too soon can increase the very fear it was meant to solve. When movement becomes limited by caution and oversight, the body has fewer chances to practice balance and trust itself. The mind begins to associate walking with danger rather than capability. Fear becomes reinforced, not eased. The environment whispers, even unintentionally, "You are fragile now." Over time, that message can be absorbed. Another hidden cost is identity. For decades, a person may have been the caretaker, the decision-maker, the one others relied on. A sudden shift into a role defined by receiving care can feel disorienting. It is not simply a change in address. It is a change in how one is seen and how one sees oneself. Adjusting to that change requires emotional work that is rarely acknowledged in advance. Families too can feel this shift, though they may not always recognize its source. Visits become scheduled, conversations grow careful, the relationship subtly changes tone. The shared world that once existed begins to narrow to a room, a visit, a goodbye. No one intends this distance, but it can grow quietly all the same. None of this means that care facilities are inherently harmful. For many, they are the right place at the right time. The cost comes when the move is made before it is truly needed, before other paths are explored, before fear is separated from reality. Timing matters more than most people realize. This chapter invites reflection, not regret. It asks a simple but important question. Does this choice expand life or contain it? When entering a facility is driven more by fear than by necessity, the emotional toll can be heavier than expected. Understanding these hidden costs allows for decisions made with clarity rather than urgency, and with respect for the life that still wants to be lived fully. For many people, the idea of staying at home is not about stubbornness or denial. It is about belonging. Home holds memory, identity, and a sense of order that cannot be recreated elsewhere. When fear of falling begins to challenge that stability, the answer does not always have to be departure. Sometimes, the answer is gentle adjustment. A safer alternative begins with seeing the home not as a risk, but as a foundation. Familiar spaces already support balance in ways that are often overlooked. The mind knows where the floor rises slightly, where the light falls in the evening, where the body naturally pauses. These quiet forms of knowledge are powerful. They create confidence without conscious effort. Preserving that familiarity can itself reduce anxiety. Safety at home does not require a dramatic transformation. It grows from small, thoughtful changes that respect how a person already lives. Better lighting can soften shadows that confuse the eye. Clear pathways allow movement without constant calculation. Simple supports, placed where the body naturally reaches, offer reassurance without intrusion. Each change sends a subtle message. You are still capable, and your space is working with you. Support, when chosen carefully, can strengthen independence rather than weaken it. Trusted assistance does not mean constant supervision. It can mean knowing someone is available when needed, without hovering. This kind of support preserves privacy and dignity. It allows a person to accept help without feeling replaced or managed. The difference lies in collaboration rather than control. Planning also plays an important role, though it is often misunderstood. Planning is not an admission of decline. It is an act of self-respect. Thinking ahead about how to respond to uncertainty brings calm. It removes the pressure of sudden decisions made in fear. When plans are shaped by the individual rather than imposed, they become empowering rather than limiting. Remaining at home allows daily life to continue in meaningful ways. Familiar routines anchor the day. Personal objects offer comfort. Neighbors remain neighbors, not memories. These elements nourish emotional well-being, which quietly influences physical confidence. When a person feels grounded, the body often follows. There is also a deep psychological benefit in choosing to stay. It reinforces the idea that aging does not automatically require retreat. It affirms that life can be adjusted rather than surrendered. This belief matters. It shapes how a person moves, how they think, how they face uncertainty. Fear loses some of its power when it is met with thoughtful response instead of escape. Of course, staying at home is not about ignoring risk. It is about addressing it with proportion and care. It recognizes that safety is not only about preventing falls, but about sustaining a life that feels worth protecting. A place where one feels calm, respected, and in control is often a place where the body feels steadier too. This alternative is not a single solution, but a mindset. It asks a different question. How can this life be supported, right where it is? When that question guides decisions, fear begins to soften. Home becomes not a hazard to flee, but a partner in continued living. And within those familiar walls, many discover that safety and independence do not have to be opposites. Confidence after 70 does not return all at once. It does not arrive through a single decision or a bold declaration. It rebuilds itself quietly, through ordinary days and small moments that slowly restore trust between the mind and the body. This final chapter is about that quiet rebuilding, and about understanding that independence is not lost in one fall, nor reclaimed in one step. For many seniors, confidence was once something taken for granted. Walking across a room required no thought. Climbing stairs felt natural. Over time, fear interrupts this ease. Movements become deliberate, cautious, watched closely by one's own thoughts. The body hesitates not because it cannot move, but because the mind is asking it to justify every step. Rebuilding confidence begins with noticing this shift. Without judgment or frustration, awareness is the first gentle tool. Awareness of how fear speaks, when it grows louder, and when it softens. Some days feel steadier than others. Some moments feel surprisingly strong. Paying attention to these variations helps separate reality from assumption. It reminds a person that ability is not gone, only uneven. And unevenness is part of being human at any age. Preparation plays a quiet but powerful role. Knowing that support exists, that plans are in place, allows the mind to relax. Confidence grows more easily when fear is not carrying the weight of the unknown. Preparation is not about expecting the worst. It is about trusting that whatever happens, it will be met with care rather than panic. That trust frees energy to focus on living, not guarding against every possible outcome. Daily choices matter more than dramatic changes. Choosing to stand instead of sit for a moment longer. Choosing to walk a familiar path rather than avoid it entirely. Choosing to engage with the world instead of shrinking from it. These choices do not announce themselves as victories, but they quietly accumulate. Each one sends a message inward. You are still here, you are still capable, and you are still deciding. Self-trust is rebuilt through consistency. When the body learns that it is listened to, not pushed or ignored, it responds with steadiness. When fear is acknowledged but not allowed to dominate, it begins to loosen. Confidence grows in environments where dignity is preserved, where help is available without being imposed, and where identity is respected. Independence, in this light, looks different than it once did. It is no longer about doing everything alone. It is about having a voice in one's own life, about choosing how support is given, when it is accepted, and where life continues to unfold. True independence is not isolation. It is agency. There is a deep peace that comes from realizing that safety and freedom are not enemies. They can exist together when decisions are made thoughtfully and with self-respect. A person can move carefully without surrendering joy. They can accept support without losing dignity. They can plan without giving up hope. As this journey comes to a close, what remains is a reminder. Aging does not demand disappearance. Fear does not require exile. Confidence, once shaken, can be rebuilt piece by piece, step by step, in the life that already exists. And for those who choose it, that life can continue at home, grounded in familiarity, guided by wisdom, and carried forward with quiet strength.